This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. When we come back, products made in China for export to the United States. But are they made by political prisoners? Overseas today, there were new charges that China is still using the labor of prisoners, some of them political prisoners, to manufacture products which are then exported to the United States. The charges are being made here as well. The timing is important because in a few weeks, President Clinton is supposed to decide whether China should continue to receive the most favorable trading terms which the U.S. has to offer other countries. Here's ABC's Bill Greenwood.
Investigators say millions of Chinese convicts, many of them imprisoned for political crimes, are being used as slave laborers in more than 1,000 prisons like this one. They make everything from socks and toys to machinery. And while it's against the law to import into the United States any goods made by prisoners, members of Congress say it's being done on a wide scale.
Apparently, some American businesses value high profits more than they value fundamental human rights.
Harry Wu was imprisoned for 19 years in the Chinese labor camp system called Laogai.
Buying Laogai products directly denies people their human rights.
Investigators showed pictures of such prisons given phony factory names to hide their violation of U.S. law. They say this chain hoist was made in such a facility for the Columbus McKinnon Company of Amherst, New York, which says it knows nothing about the alleged use of prison labor. Critics have asked President Clinton to reconsider China's preferential trading status, which is up for renewal. No one expects him to cancel the trading concessions, but there is hope he will pressure Beijing to quit using prison labor. Bill Greenwood, ABC News, Washington.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Another issue tonight that directly affects the American economy, trade with China. Should China get the best trade treatment if it continues illegal arms sales and forced birth control policies? Secretary of State Christopher said today those issues concern him as he considers whether to extend the most favored trade status for China. And tonight, NBC's national correspondent Bob Kerr has an exclusive report on another China violation, prison labor.
For 19 years, Harry Wu was a political prisoner in China. He's tried to convince the American government that much of what China exports to the U.S. is made by prison inmates. Today, Wu's findings, which he put into a report, were endorsed by 3 members of Congress.
Whether the Chinese government is making $100 million or $1 exporting these goods, it is immoral for the United States to prop up this inhumane system.
China has promised not to export prison-made goods to the U.S., but Wu and the lawmakers say these hoists were sold in this country by an American company. U.S. law bans the import of goods made by forced labor. When confronted with the allegation, the president of the Columbus McKinnon Corporation first denied it.
Well, I don't think they would be, A, telling the truth, and B,
Later, he seemed less sure.
no sign of guard, there's no sign of any forced presence.
Do you think the Chinese could be somehow fooling you on this?
They could possibly be fooling me, yes.
Lads showed us photographs from his visit to the Chinese factory. Each worker's head was shaved, and they wore what appeared to be uniforms. Clothing Harry Wu says is worn by Chinese prisoners. Wu has gathered evidence that he says proves that the Chinese factory Ladd's company deals with is, in reality, a prison.
If you cannot complete your quota, you got a trouble. They will remove your food and torture you, put into solid confinement to punish you.
Today's report says China not only sells us chain hoists, but a variety of items made by prisoners in forced labor. Rubber-soled shoes, boots, kitchenware, toys, tools, and sporting goods. Things Americans use every day. Harry Wu says hundreds of thousands of political prisoners work in these factories.
Well, I don't care what kind of business you want to do, but please don't buy the blood. Don't buy the tears.
Bob Kerr, NBC News at the Capitol.
This is CNN.
This is a presentation of CNN Business News.
Live From the world's financial capital, New York City, this is Moneyline with Lou Dobbs.
Good evening. Well, with President Clinton to decide in 2 weeks whether to renew China's most favored nation trade status, lobbying efforts on Capitol Hill are reaching a fever pitch. Secretary of State Warren Christopher today put China on notice that its favorable trading status with the United States is in jeopardy, partly because of reports that China is stepping up coercive family planning practices.
The United States does not support coercive abortion. It does not support sterilization as a population technique. I think it's very important to find ways in which no U.S. funds go to China's support of that kind of a program.
And today, members of Congress released a study that claims China is still making products with slave labor, and that U.S. companies are knowingly importing these goods to the United States. Representative Nancy Pelosi urged her colleagues to put human rights conditions on China's trade status.
It would be a cruel hoax if the Cold War was fought only about access to cheap labor and potential markets. We talked about freedom, we talk about it everywhere. If we say only accept if you're large and if you have cheap labor and a potential market, then all the rest goes by the by.
Well, former Federal Reserve Board Chairman Paul Volcker says not so fast. He told Congress today that linking China's trade status to human rights will only make things worse.
It would be counterproductive to cut off trade and cut off openness or discourage the openness of the Chinese in the economic front in the hopes that that would improve the human rights situation. In the long run, if you were successful in isolating them economically, I suspect it would have the opposite result.
The United States imported more than $25 billion of Chinese goods in 1992.